in a parish, then you got to get people on the same purpose, right? What are we here to do? Why are we here on Sunday morning? We're here to encounter Jesus in the Eucharist, right? But Jesus has a mission, right? And he wants to create a communion, right, with everyone. And he wants to draw as many people into this communion as is possible. And he needs all of us to draw more people into this communion, into this experience of communion with each other and with God that takes place in the Mass. And so we're all involved in this. And so then you begin to vision the purpose for our church is to go and make disciples. It's to love God, to love people. It's to engage in the greatest life possible because God has created all things and he's the greatest God possible. So we got a purpose, right? Join us in this purpose. And when you connect purpose and relationship, then all of a sudden you got synergy because you know people and then they're walking with you on the same purpose and the whole thing comes to light.
Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst in the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are powered for impact. Hi, and welcome back. My name is Ron Huntley. Welcome to the Leadership Podcast. I am your host. In June, we're going to be doing a podcast answering your questions. On what topic? On handling conflict in missional parishes. What do I mean by that? Parishes that are determined to make an impact. How do you deal with relational conflict? Surely to goodness, you have some really good questions that Lorraine and I would love to answer in that episode. Just go to huntleyleadership.com/questions. Give us your questions, and we're going to build a whole podcast around that to answer them for you. So please go to that. Welcome to the show today. My guest today was only the second podcast we released back in January the 7th, 2021. It's 2 years later, and we're checking in with Deacon Peter Pellicaan from the Brisbane Diocese. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks, Ron. Great to be back.
I just realized that I thought, geez, it's been well over a year. And then I looked at the dates, like, it's been 2 years. I'm so excited because I remember when we checked in or when we did that podcast, I thought, I want to check in with you a year from now. And here it is 2 years later. Man, where does the time go?
So much has happened, hasn't it? And I think we developed a strategic plan. We'd gone through a process with the staffing here in the diocese, and that we're a few years into that now. We're 3.5 years into a 5-year plan, so we've got some progress reporting to do.
Yeah, that's right. State of the Union. Where are we at now?
You
share with our listeners, because a lot of people will be hearing you for the first time. Just tell us what your role is. If it's changed, tell us the new role, and then let's dive into what it looks like and means and tastes like to bring renewal to a diocese, because that is not an easy task.
Indeed. Yeah, so my role is Executive Director of Evangelization Brisbane, which is the agency of the Archdiocese tasked with supporting parishes and communities in their mission to make disciples of all nations. And we do that through 7 teams. We've got children and families, youth, young adults, adult formation, parish leadership, so working on pastoral planning for parishes. We've got inclusion, which is like First Nations engagement, ecumenical engagement, interreligious dialogue, multicultural pastoral care, all those kind of things. And then there's also vocations, so trying to get new priests, new young men to consider priesthood. And then finally, we have a retreat centre as well called Santa Teresa Spirituality Centre. So all of that keeps us fairly busy.
Yeah, that sounds like that will keep you out of trouble or keep you in trouble. I guess it depends on how you look at it.
Bit of both.
And yeah, a little bit of both, absolutely. And so, you say you're 3.5 years into a 5-year plan. I remember being at St. Benedict years ago, and we did a 5-year plan together, and we'd never done that before. And then we set goals around key areas, and it was more like a group of drunken sailors at an auction. Like we'd say, hey, how many people do you think we can get through Alpha? I don't know, 500. No, I think we can do 1,000. I bet we can do 3,000, 4,000. So we write this number down. And I remember going back at it 3.5 years later and going, what were we thinking? Like, this is impossible. So where are you at with that? Were you guys drinking that day too? Or were you guys far more accurate?
A little bit of that. Yeah. We were probably a bit on the coffee, a bit on the caffeine, bit overexcited. Maybe Red Bull gives you wings. But no, look, it's been fascinating. The process of planning is an important one for any organisation and any parish. If it's the old adage: if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And a strategic plan means that you can lead together with a community that know where they're going. They know what they're trying to achieve. It's not, every decision is not dependent on me as the big cheese, as the boss, but they know what they're doing because they've got their strategic objectives. And it means I'm just keeping everybody accountable to what they've already agreed to do. So as a process, it's crucially important. Another piece of it for us was really thinking carefully through what are the aspects and elements in a parish that really need to be functional for the parish to grow. And so those areas that I just outlined were driven by that. Like, it's our view that the best investment that a parish can make for evangelization is into children's ministry under the age of 13. So primary school age, and statistics tell us that something like over 60% of people who call themselves Christian began that road and first started in their road towards Jesus before the age of 13. And so that's the best possible chance to invest in children. But if you're going to get the children there, you usually get the parents, and it's important the parents have a good, positive, nourishing experience in your parish as well. So we have the adult formation piece. If you've got children engaged in the primary school, you've got to keep them engaged in the high school, so youth, young adults, and so on. And then you need parishes in order for them to be engaging and going somewhere. They've got to do planning, which is what the leadership piece brings. And then you want a parish that's welcoming and inclusive, which is why we have the inclusion team there to think through what it means to welcome people. So our whole structure was built around what we think is necessary for a healthy, vibrant, functional parish. Now, back to your point about the goals and how much we were drinking, we had a little bit of that where, it was our dream to have at least 5 parishes with youth ministries of 100 kids coming every Friday night. This is just one anecdotal example.
Yeah.
And we found, I was used to that. I used to be a Protestant minister. I came into the church in 2013. And so I pastored, large contemporary Pentecostal churches. And I read my way into the Catholic Church. That's a whole other story. But
listen to the first episode.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, in my mid-20s running a youth ministry, and, by our third year, we had 170 kids coming every Friday night. And, so I was thinking, well, let's do that here, Why can't?
Yeah.
Why not?
How hard can it be?
So we've been given that a swing, But, of course, the context is different, and successful ministries require scaffolding in all kinds of areas. A youth ministry doesn't grow in isolation. It grows because of a healthy parish. It grows because of a healthy school. It grows because the principal and the priest are on side and are signposting the victories of the youth ministry. So a priest is jumping up and saying, Friday night we had 70 kids at youth. Isn't that fantastic? If you've got high school age kids, we love to see your kids there. It's so great to see young people engaging in faith, finding faith, hope, and love in the Catholic Church. Get them to youth. It's all that stuff.
Yeah.
That creates the larger context for the success of an individual ministry. So we've had to revise that goal of 100 down to about 50. So at the moment, we're 3 years in, we've got 3 youth groups. One of them's averaging about, between 40 and 70 every Friday night. So we're excited about that. Beautiful. It's one of the largest ones in the diocese. And then we've got a couple that are around about 30. So that's an example of just revising those goals in light of reality. We've been working hard in this space for 3 years, engaging with schools and priests and, in the education space as well. And that's turned out to be more of a challenge than we expected. So we had to revise our expectations there.
Peter, I just want to speak into that. I remember during COVID, the church I was going to at the time, I couldn't even get them to help. Like, I was helping all these other churches over the world. So I'll help you for nothing. Like, let me help you.
Yeah.
And of course, they don't even return my phone call. And they completely shut down everything. And it was just like crazy. And then, you get a few other people, we had to shut down our youth ministry because, it's just not possible. And then at that same time, my son, because he's a ice hockey player, played for the Moncton Wildcats at the time. And he's going downstairs. I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I have to speak tonight. I said, who are you speaking to? A youth group, the Wesleyan Church, a different tradition. And I said, okay.
How many people are there? 170. The Catholics, we can't do anything, and the Wesleyan Church gets 170. Like, I do not understand what renders us so ineffective.
Yeah, our expectations of the faithful, the lay faithful, are way, way, way too low.
Amen.
And what I mean by that is people find life when they engage in the mission of Christ. And it doesn't matter whether you're a priest or you're a neophyte. If you're engaged in the mission, there's joy. It's why Pope Francis talks about the joy of the gospel. Sharing our faith is joyful, right? And so in the churches that I'd come from, I had a youth leadership team of young adults with 23 people coming every Wednesday night or every second Wednesday night. We would plan the next couple of weeks, and we would pray and ask God to move and bring more young people into our community. As Catholics, we're going, you'd have to put them on the payroll to ask them to do that. I mean, that's like nearly 60 hours a week that you're asking them to do. I'm like, these guys want to do it. They can see the vision. They see the mission. They see how much it can change a young person's life to encounter Jesus and to experience his life and his love. And so we could kind of raise the bar there and say, look, God wants to use you in the life of the church, and you were baptized into his mission, and you don't need to be an ordained bishop, priest, or deacon in order to get involved. In fact, we need more laity involved. We need young people, young adults who can engage in youth ministry. And this is true in every layer of the church, that the more we involve people, the better it is for them, the more joyful their experience of church is. And the only provision there is that if you are going to attract volunteers, you're going to engage them in the life of the church, you got to lead well. You got to follow through. You got to share the vision. This is what we're trying to do, right? Friday night, we want to see as many young people as we can get to encounter Jesus. And so we are not going to put on a flaming video and eat some pizzas and go, oh, isn't that fun? I say video, I'm showing my age here, right? No, we're going to praise God. We're going to talk about how God changes our lives. Some of you guys are going to share about what God has done in your life. You're going to share about your experience at your confirmation and what the power of the Holy Spirit did in your confirmation, or a moment you've had in confession or in Eucharist that just transformed your life. And then we're going to invite other people. We're going to invite the young people there. We're going to say to them, look, if you want to encounter God tonight, you can do that, right? And we're going to invite them to stand up and to come forward. We're going to lay a hand on their shoulder. We're going to pray and ask God to meet them right where they are. And we're going to encourage them then to become part of our mass community, right? Now, Catholics typically say, whoa, you can't do that. This is going to scare them away. Mate, the only thing that is scaring people off the Catholic Church is that we're not standing for anything.
Man.
And we've made it so easy, and we're pandering to everyone, and we don't want to ask too much because, we don't want to kind of encroach on your life or share anything bold. And it's like, the apostles didn't go out on mission by pandering to everyone and just making it easy. They called people to a life of discipleship, a life of faith, hope, and love, a life of faith that steps out of the boat and doesn't just sit where it is. And when we do that, the whole Catholic tradition is compelling. It comes to life.
Oh.
And that's how saints are formed, right? The saints become saints because their lives are compelling, not because they sat back and did the bare minimum. Anyway, rant over.
No, we're just getting started. We're just going to feed off each other this whole podcast. This, first 4-hour podcast. That's it. Make up for 2 years not talking.
Yeah.
You're saying something that reminds me of a podcast I watched with Jordan Peterson and Bishop Robert Barron. And it was so funny because, at the time, Jordan Peterson was still not confessing anything in terms of belief. And it just been so fun to watch him because we just seem to see this intellect coming to faith in real time, almost like C.S. Lewis, except we get to watch it all because he's online so much. But anyway, in his podcast with Bishop Barron, he says, you know what the problem is with the Catholic Church? He's saying that to Bishop Barron. Like, well, tell me, Jordan, what's the problem?
Enlighten me.
He said, you don't ask enough of people. You don't ask enough of people. And I just thought that just right in line with what you're saying. And the other piece is, and I found it frustrating. No disrespect to Bishop Robert Barron. He's amazing. One of the first podcasts, the one before you, that guy came to faith because of Bishop Robert Barron. So let's give props. But at one point he said, it should, like, a life following Christ should be the greatest adventure ever. Like, it's dangerous. It is scary. It is fun. You're fully alive if you're crazy enough to follow Christ. And it gives life purpose and meaning beyond your wildest dreams. Like, welcome to faith. And it was something like that. And Bishop Pellicaan said, that's exactly the call to the priesthood. And I couldn't agree more in one sense, hopefully. Now, the other part of that is, he said, because you become a priest and you get a parish to take care of. And I remember thinking to myself, I wanted to jump out into the screen. I'm like, parish to take care of, as if everybody's useless. Like, hey, come coddle these useless Catholics that can't do anything, that can't live life without you because you're amazing and they're just useless. And they're not to be cared for. They're to be mobilized. Yes, cared for, but for purpose and meaning. Mobilize them to make a difference in the world. Don't coddle them as if they're useless and do all the ministry for them and hope maybe they show up and do a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
Hardly. And I'm
sure Bishop. Well, and I'm sure Bishop Barron would agree with you on that. I mean, I think
yes, he would. I know he would.
The thing that I hear when you say it's the call to the priesthood, and you're like, it's the call to all the baptized, not just the priesthood, right? We're all called to mission, right? It's
priest,
not
prophet,
just the
and king, baby.
Exactly. And so I think sometimes people think that giving your life to Jesus means a discernment to the priesthood. No. When you're baptized into the mission. Jesus calls every one of us to go on mission with him. And that looks different for each one of us, but it's absolutely an adventure. And the more that we surrender ourselves to what it is God's calling us to do, the more life we find in our faith. It's an adventure for everyone. The adventure's for everyone, not just the ordained.
Amen. Well, and something else you talk about is sometimes, and that's why I love building teams with priests, because a lot of times they're petrified to ask anybody to join them on the leadership team, because that's 2 hours a week just for that one meeting, plus another hour of the week for checking in on one-on-ones, plus whoever you're supporting in them. And most of them are volunteers. And priests like, nobody's going to do that. I'm thinking, you wouldn't believe how many people would love to partner with a parish priest, lay down their life to build the Roman Catholic Church, to build a church that is actually worth going to. Like, all kinds of people would want to do that. But once they realize that that's possible, it changes their paradigm. But the truth is, if you're not asking them to do that, what do you think they're doing when they don't go to church? They're so involved in their kids' sports, their kids' dance, all these other things in the community where they're crushed at spending a ton of their own money traveling with sports teams and everything else. And they love doing it. And yet, what do you feel guilty for inviting them to something amazing? And I don't know why. It's like we think it isn't amazing or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, most people in our pews today, if you invite them to be involved in a process that's going to help the parish come to life, they're like, yes, let's do that. Now, when we talk about what that means, they might be not so excited. You mean I can't keep playing the organ, or I can't keep being on the reader.
Right.
Other people are going to be reading as well. Like, we're going to have people.
I'm ready to share this ministry. Hold on a minute.
Exactly. There's a bit of that goes on. Right. But most people in our pews want to see the church thrive. And
Amen.
There's something deep within them that hungers for that experience of God and the experience of the church being life-giving and nourishing for everyone who's involved. And if you as a priest or a leader in a parish can invite someone to say, hey, we realize that the experience people are having at Mass on the weekends could be better. It's not great. It's not very lively. It's not very engaging. It's pretty quiet. It's pretty tired. There's so much that we could do. Would you be a part of a process to help us bring life to the experience? Now, we know theologically and sacramentally that, you objectively receive grace in the Eucharist, and that's great, right? But it's not an excuse for a bad experience. It's not an excuse for bad music, for bad welcome, for bad culture. And if you can build all those other things around the Eucharist, the whole thing comes to life.
Oh, and that was our experience when we went about trying to make a church matter at St. Benedict Parish. We just really believed that there was so much to learn from all kinds of other traditions and stuff that didn't take away from who we were as Roman Catholics. It brought it to life. And there's just so many things. It's like, well, there's no reason we can't do some of those things. And as we did, holy man, it brought the church to life. And it was so life-giving. It was what I always thought the Catholic Church could be. It should be a place of unbelievable transformation where I am filled with the Holy Spirit so much so it's palpable. And that's what brings the Eucharist to life. That's what gives, if the whole church is dead, people look like they're going to a funeral. I've got no friends. Music stinks. There's no hospitality. The preacher can't preach. And I go home, I'm thinking, I don't know, that the Eucharist doesn't feel like it's making a difference in my life. And people are walking away in droves. And again, nobody sets out to do that. And I know that's being harsh.
Well, it is being honest, but isn't it? I mean, statistically, that's the situation we're in the West, is people are leaving, most churches through COVID, most Catholic churches have lost around 30%, have lost around 30% of their parishioners, and that's true in our diocese as well. So I think the thing that's fascinating too, and it picks up on what you're saying here, is sometimes priests feel like they need to lead by doing everything for the people, but that's not the case. What people are looking for is to be set free in the gifting that God has placed on them. And so if there's one thing I could say to Catholic leaders of all descriptions, but especially our priests, is you've got to see yourself as an empowerer of others. You've got to see yourself as a dream releaser. There's people in your community that have got a hunger to do something in the church or to see life. And rather than you shutting it down and making it difficult for them, or checking every little dot and tittle about whether they're suitable, it's to go, how do you take that energy, that enthusiasm, that charism, and make it come to life in your community? And sometimes what someone wants to do is not actually what you want. And you're like, no, that's not going to happen, right? But what you want to do is not just say, no, look, that's not something we'd want to do. You've got to give them an alternative, right? So, look, that's a really interesting idea. Could we try this instead? Or in the first instance, let's do this. And you take their enthusiasm and their energy and you reshape it to somewhere where you can set that energy and that life and that passion free. And when we release our people in their gifts, they feel free, they feel empowered, they feel joyful, and they draw others with them in that, and it changes the whole atmosphere in the place. So releasing people, empowering them in what they feel God's calling them to, rather than putting boundaries and putting up gates to make things difficult. And what it does is this might be counterintuitive to some, but it actually empowers the priest even more.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Because the priest all of a sudden has these people that are excited, they've got energy, and they're working alongside the priest to take the mission forward. I saw in a leadership theory book once, in a Catholic it was a priesthood book, and I can't remember what the name of the book was, but it had this image of, the priest and the people, and the priest serves the people, and the people serve the priest. It's like, what? Are you serious? The priest serves the people and the people serve the priest? Seriously? You come to church to serve the priest? The priest comes to church? Like, this does not understand the mission. It doesn't understand what Jesus has called all the baptized to. It doesn't even understand the role of the apostle, I mean, Jesus didn't say, now get a whole lot of people who can serve you. No, go and make disciples. Like, the priest is a leader in the mission and is leading the mission with the people. And your job as a leader in the parish and as the priest is not merely just to serve these people and have these people serve you, but it's to empower them in the mission so that with you, they go and help you in this mission to make disciples and change the world for Jesus. So it's together heading in the same direction. It's not this kind of little echo chamber of people serving people and within a room,
So painful.
It's a strange notion, but yeah.
It is. So here's one of the things that I've come to know a long time ago, but it'd be interesting how you guys are viewing this from a diocesan perspective. I would suggest that, everything rises and falls on leadership, like everything. And, read Kings 1 and 2, like you just watch the Israel go up and down, up and down. But depending on the king's faithfulness. And so, and I look at my own life and I think, when I'm faithful, all of a sudden things go a little smoother. When I'm selfish moron, which I can be, it doesn't go so well. What do you know? And so even how I lead myself matters. So my fidelity to God and my intimacy with Jesus in prayer and just, it's just beautiful. However, they're not trained for any of this stuff. It's not their fault. I just did a podcast with actually It'll be out by the time this one's released. But it's with Father Pierluigi, and it was just so beautiful because he spent the first 18 years of his priesthood as a formator, former priest, and then his order asked him to take a parish, and so I think it was in Australia, and so he took this parish. But he said, I didn't have a clue how to run a parish. I'm thinking, hold on a minute, weren't you? You just say you were teaching people how to do that for the last 18 years. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, and so then he's been just doing beautiful. He's such a humble man. Like, it was such a treat to talk to this man. So humble, and just listening to how he grew and how he ran into kind of plateaus and how he broke through there, and then he'd run into another plateau and he'd break through it. It's just so fun listening to his story. And I asked him a question. If you found yourself heading back to becoming a formator, what would you do differently? Like, what do you know now that you would do differently if you went back? And what he said to me, I found fascinating. He said, I wouldn't assume just because somebody's in the seminary that they are committed to Jesus. Like, they've had a transformational encounter with Jesus and have gone all in as a disciple. Yep. He said, but I didn't know that. We just assumed that if you're at the seminary, you must have had these experiences. And I've coached lots of priests that haven't. I've coached lots of priests that have. But I've also coached lots of priests that haven't. And if that's the case in a seminary, how true is it in a church?
Totally.
We make the assumption that everybody's at the same place. It's like, I think the safer assumption would be that that's absolutely not the case, even if they're baptized Catholic.
Yep.
But, so, priests aren't formed, like, in the seminary and or when they leave the seminary, to think like this or to have those skills. Even the way you talked about redirecting somebody's passion and energy towards something that might be a good fit, even though it might be slightly different. That's a skill. None of that's addressed in any of their formation, pre or post. And so what are we doing about that? Like, is that even on the radar?
I think it's a huge question. I mean, the whole issue of seminary formation it's on the radar universally. And I know Rome has done work on a new ratio, and countries have been working on a ratio, which is the document that underpins formation. Yeah. But one of the challenges, of course, is, when you're only talking with people in the same world with the same experience, then you can miss some of the breadth of leadership experience that goes beyond that of a local parish priest. Another key factor in the moment that we're in is a lot of guys that, are in their 50s and 60s now were ordained at a time where the church in the West was just going gangbusters. We had large churches and they were filled, and it was a time where the church was what people did on Sunday and Saturday. It was the whole community life, it was their sport, it was their Sunday morning, it was hospitality. It was just so integrated with the tribe and the community. And what that means is if you're becoming a priest in that environment, you haven't had to pioneer. You haven't had to build anything. You've come in when it's already large, and then you're trying to do something with it. And that's what that does is it tends to teach you how to maintain what is. And so then we've got a whole generation of people who have had that learnt experience. Now, whether they were conscious of it or not, they've learned to maintain what was there. And what was there was pretty good. I mean, the parish that I serve at on the weekends, it had sort of 1,600 people over, 4 masses in the 80s and 90s, and we'd have 250 there today, So, and this is the trajectory of Catholic churches all around the Western world, that were thriving in the 80s and just fell apart spectacularly. And what that means then is, what does it mean to pioneer now? Like, we've gone through this massive decline right across the West. How do we get the skills to pioneer as well? Because we need priests and bishops that have vision, have passion, who can see what God is asking of the church right now and what it's going to take to get there, and to have the courage then to share the vision and then go and enact that vision and take people with you. And the other thing, of course, that complicates that is, there's a whole lot of leadership theory out there that's not yet integrated into seminary formation, which is super helpful if you want to be a leader. I did a lot of it. I did a master's in educational leadership. So you're looking at all these theories and all of that I use all the time. I wasn't doing it then thinking I was going to be in this role. But I use those the models of leadership. I use the understanding of how power works in an organization, how to use the right kind of power in the right context, how to coach people so that when you're managing people, you're not just sitting there like a dictator, but you're asking the right questions to get them to appropriately reflect. These are all things that are missing from the seminary formation. And then the other piece, and I think I mentioned this in the first podcast too, but Simon Sinek makes this point, and that is one of the most formative experiences for any leader is having your own children. And the reason that is because when you've got a family, when you've got kids, you got to lead those kids. You've got to set boundaries and keep them. You've got to create a culture in your home. What kind of home do you want this to be? What sort of experiences do you want your family to have? What's going to happen at a mealtime? What are going to become the norms in your home? And you can be intentional about that or not. You can set the culture or not. You can be a passenger in that and you pay the price for being a passenger, or you can get on the front foot and lead it, and what kind of kids do you develop? And so that experience of parenting does a heck of a lot of good in terms of informing what it means then to create culture in an organization, create culture in a parish. What kind of parish do we want to be? What sort of people are we trying to engage? What sort of experiences do we want them to have? How do we want them to respond when we say things? How do we want them to feel when they come into the parish? How do we want them to react at the end? What kind of experiences? And then when it comes to hospitality and volunteering, what are the expectations? And so all of that flows into that. And again, that experience is, of course, is not part of priestly ministry. So we're on the back foot, in terms of forming our clergy. And we've got so many great clergy who are doing so many great things.
I agree.
And I think it was Pope Francis made that point about, the fact that nobody talks about a plane until it falls down, and you can have millions of planes in the air, and it's the one that crashes that gets all the media attention. And so priests have copped it a bit because we've had a few fall in the last 30 years, and that's brought a lot of it's reflected on the many others that continue to be faithful. But I say all that to say, because of those missing experiences in formation, in seminary, and also in life, in terms of just learning how to adult, learning how to parent, learning how to pay bills, all those things, it means that a lot of our clergy, by the time they come out of seminary, are starting on the back foot because the life experience they've had when they begin as a priest at 25 is about half of what anyone else has had who's had to pay for their rent and organise their food and manage their finances and then develop a relationship and show up to work on time and all these little pieces that help when you're a leader. And so for priests out there who might be listening to this, I don't say all of this to, open any wounds or point out any flaws as much as to say, these are experiences that the rest of us have had because that's what life gives you that really help us, in a lot of ways in becoming leaders. And so the question then for those that haven't had that is how can you find those now? And, things like what you do with priests all the time in your coaching, that picks up on the gaps left by the leadership formation. And for priests to have deep and close relationships with families in their parish can help priests to come and to begin to understand how leadership works in a home.
That's so true. Peter, when I think about the seminary formation and all the theology that the Catholic priests get in terms of formed in is spectacular, and I'm not even sure, and I don't know, be interested to hear your perspective on this. I'm not even sure that's the place to get the type of training that we're talking about, only because they get out of the seminary and they're not parish priests, they're associate priests. And in North America, we use the word pastor. They're not a pastor, they're an associate priest. And what's funny is when I talk to associates, they say, nobody ever taught me how to be an associate. They only taught me how to be the pastor. And yet you're an associate for 5 years, and that can be a grueling experience, one that's very disorienting and disillusioning. There'll be a lot of disappointment can happen during that period of time because nobody even taught them how to be an associate. They don't get a chance to do the things that we're talking about. I almost think, wouldn't it be cool? Why do I have an opinion on this, and who cares what I think? But I'll say it anyway. Wouldn't it be cool as if, Father Peter is going to become a parish priest? He's finally going to get the charge of a parish. What if we took 6 months and that's when we taught him these skills? Because you're actually going to care, because you're actually going to be able to use them. I've actually had associates in the parish leadership course for pastors I run. And I tried that once, and I'll never do it again because they just disengage. It's almost like they don't care. It's like, I don't have any power to make any of these decisions, set the culture, do anything else. I'm powerless. And so it's like, blah, blah, blah. I'm not interested. And it's not because they wouldn't be interested if they could make a difference. They're just not in a place in their life where they can make a difference. So teaching them that in seminary is almost torture. I almost think, well, teach them how to be an associate in the seminary and then teach them how to be a parish priest when they get out. I don't know. That's my thinking. Yeah.
But it's an interesting thought. I think it depends a lot too on a parish priest and whether the existing priest understands and leads, understands all the leadership theory and actually leads out of that and leads collaboratively and sets vision. And because you can learn how to lead a parish from an existing priest who knows how to lead.
100%.
It's just in many cases, our clergy are not formed to lead, and so they follow a mass schedule and they do the sacraments beautifully, but in terms of how do we get this parish from here to here, it's not part of their skill set. So I think your point's an interesting one because it's that whole concept of just in time learning.
Yeah,
you learn the best when you need to know something. Just before this podcast started, I needed to know how to sort my sound out, and I'm using a little interface here, and I couldn't hear you. So all of a sudden I'm Googling, and there's the answer. I got the answer I needed because I needed it there and then. Now, if I'd have looked at that yesterday, I would have had to Google it again anyway because I didn't need it yesterday. Right? So
that's a great point.
Yeah, you're dead right. And that's been my own experience a bit too. I remember, I did my, because I went through the sort of Protestant system, so I did my first undergrad in theology. And I was doing a bit of youth pastoring on the side, just part-time. And then I was in the parish then as an associate priest, was what, to use Catholic language, an associate pastor. But then in my second appointment, I was in a parish that had a school. And so I was asked to lead the youth ministries in that church and then also cover Christian studies and study of religion in the school, right? And I had an undergrad in theology but no education. So I did my education degree as soon as I started in that school. So it was just in time, I had to go and then do that. And then I was then put on the executive of the college. And so I thought, well, I better get some skills under my belt. So I did my master's in leadership while I was on the executive of the school.
That's impressive.
And it was perfect, right? Because I was learning these leadership principles and seeing the problems that is created in any organization right in front of my eyes. And so you've got an obvious application to then, take those principles and apply them in the school, And so then I become Catholic and I kick off my PhD, and then I'm working as the private secretary of the Archbishop, right? So it's great to do a PhD in theology when you're working for an Archbishop like ours who can speak 6 languages and has a PhD in biblical studies.
He's unbelievable.
He's amazing, right? So you've got some catching up to do, right? So each time it's been just in time learning, and that really motivates you to learn.
Yeah, it does motivate you to learn. I agree. Yeah. That's always been my vision for, even working with parishes. I remember when we turned our church around, it was amazing, and the book was written, and we conferences and everything was just unfolding. It was just so exciting. And I remember at one point looking at my pastor saying, our next level of impact isn't going to be from growing our church even more. It's going to be helping other people grow their churches. And it was just so fun to begin to do that. And what a lot of people are finding when they are crazy enough to go on that journey, because it's hard, but it's also hard not to be wildly successful. And so you might as well put the effort into a place that's going to be rewarding and honor God. But sometimes in diocese, people will attack you. You become target number one. So, but I would think, in a perfect world, I would love to be able to help a handful of churches in a diocese become wildly successful, know why they're wildly successful so they can give it away, and really become training grounds for seminarians and people that maybe are going to become a pastor later. And we could literally start taking some of those families from that church with that pastor's permission and bring them with you to your new assignment with all of this learning, with all their passion, with all their generosity of giving, with all their leadership skills, and actually start to transplant health in churches. That would be my dream, because the seminary in and of itself is doing, I'm hoping, and I'm guessing, I'm not a seminarian, I don't know, but I'm guessing they're doing a really good job, a very diligent job, a very intentional job of training people in theology. But we need practical schools where they can go and learn their craft and their skill of leadership. And I don't know a better place to do. I don't think that university is a great place for that. I think the local parish is the best place for it, under the tutelage of a pastor who gets it and understands leadership and has structures and meetings and all these processes where we're unleashing people for impact. It's like, man, can you imagine if these theologians, that was part of the understanding of what happened, and bishops had these and would support these priests who were crazy enough to go on that journey to create that space, that they become real life training ground for excellence.
That's my absolutely. That's the dream, isn't it? I mean, healthy parishes form healthy priests. And so if you can put seminarians into healthy parishes that are led well, they're seeing that example straight up.
Right.
I think one of the most important learnings in the Catholic context is understanding how power is used in an organisation. And the reason that's important is because in our church, there tends to be an overemphasis on hierarchical power. And what I mean by that is, in the canons, the Pope is the supreme legislator. So if anyone's going to change a canon, it's the Pope. In a parish, the priest is essentially the CEO, and the pastoral councils are not boards of directors. They're advisory boards, and so they give advice to a priest. But the priest can essentially do what he wants as long as he's within the limits of canon and civil law, which gives a priest, or a bishop for that matter in the diocese, an extraordinary amount of power. Now, power is only a bad thing if it's used badly. It's a good thing if it's used well, right? So the amount of power given to clergy is not necessarily the problem, it's the use of that power. And I think here I would say that the chief mistake that any leader can make, whether you're in a church or in an organisation, is to use hierarchical power. And what I mean by that is, all right, so here I am at EB, I've got about 35 staff. If I start telling them what to do because I'm the boss, nobody's going to want to work for me. Nobody's going to stick around. Here's this, I'm going, it's a perfectly reasonable direction. Why aren't you doing it? I've asked you to do it. I'm your boss. Do it, That is not going to inspire anybody to follow me. Another thing that we do in the church a bit, we use hierarchical leadership, and we also use, I'm just trying to remember the name for it, but it's it's using your inside knowledge over people. So our connections, I think it's called connection power. I'd have to look it up. I could find it and send it to you. But this is the concept, right? It's, okay, I work in the office and I have a connection with the Archbishop and the Vicar General. You better do what I say, or I'll give you a bad reputation with those around you. I can stifle your career trajectory by my connections. And there's a little bit of that goes on in our church where it's like you're either in or you're out, and if you're out, you are out. And if you're in, you're one of the in people. And that's a really scary way to use power. There's leadership manuals on this, and it happens in organisations all over the place. It's a way of kind of managing up and controlling people below you by how you share. And what I would want to say to everyone listening is, don't use hierarchical power. Don't use that connection power. You've got a connection that someone else needs, so you're holding it over them. Don't use information to, I've got all the information, I'm only going to drip feed it to you because that gives me power over you. Where I lead from myself, and where I'd encourage others to lead from, is relational power and purpose power. And what I mean by that is, I'm on this podcast with you, Ron, because we're friends and we got a relationship. And when you emailed me to go, do you want to come on? Of course, right? Now, the podcast is secondary to our friendship, right? I'm here primarily because I believe in you and I believe in your mission and I appreciate your friendship over the years. And it's the relational power that you have with me that inspires me to take an hour out of my day to have a chat with you, because we've got a friendship and we see the same things. And that relational power is far more effective than any hierarchical power or connection or knowledge power that you can use with someone. And that's crucial in the church, because if you get to know your pastoral council or your finance council, your liturgy committee people, get to know them as people, what's going on in their lives, how they're going, how's their children, their grandchildren, their husbands, their wives, what's going on at work, how's their health. If you know them as people first, and then you invite them to do something, they will do anything for you, because
Amen.
It's all about relationship. Now, the second piece that I mentioned there before, relational power and purpose power. Purpose power is about being clear on the purpose. And this is another reason why I'm here having this conversation with you, because you and I have an aligned purpose. We both want to see parishes right across the world come to life, grow with the evangelization mission of the church. The young people encounter Jesus, people of every age encounter Jesus and discover his real presence in the Eucharist and find the profound meaning of the Mass. It's incredibly beautiful, right? It's just, it's the dream. It's the God who is beyond all things, who is indescribable, comes and shares himself with us, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the altar and Mass. And it's like, this is a miracle going on right now. Where is everybody, right? So
I agree.
We're joined in this purpose, right?
Yes.
So, you jump together and we've got the same purpose, and we're doing it in our different parts of the world as best as we can. And so in a parish then, you got to get people on the same purpose, right? What are we here to do? Why are we here on Sunday morning? We're here to encounter Jesus in the Eucharist, right? But Jesus has a mission, right? And he wants to create a communion, right, with everyone. And he wants to draw as many people into this communion as is possible. And he needs all of us to draw more people into this communion, into this experience of communion with each other and with God that takes place in the Mass. And so we're all involved in this. And so then you begin to vision the purpose for our church is to go and make disciples. It's to love God, to love people. It's to engage in the greatest life possible, because God has created all things and he's the greatest God possible. So we got a purpose, right? Join us in this purpose. And when you connect purpose and relationship, then all of a sudden you got synergy, because you know people and then they're walking with you on the same purpose, and the whole thing comes to life. And you don't need to pull rank, you don't need to say, oh, I'm the priest, or I'm the boss, or I've got this role, or it's my prerogative. You're just leading people towards the purpose, and they're loving it, and they're in relationship with you, and the whole thing happens so organically, and it's joyful, right? It's not, rather than me managing people, it's me working alongside colleagues for the purpose and for the mission. And it's like, it's fruitful, it's joyful, and I'm not thinking about myself as the boss. I'm just another person in the machine.
Amen.
Rant over.
That's why too, as you're speaking that stuff, thanks for your clarity and labeling those. I find it helpful. I think people are going to find it helpful. I find it helpful. And that's why I love Alpha so much. And people get sick of me saying that, but I'll say it anyway, because you literally have dinner with them 11 weeks in a row. And so you go from a perfect stranger that you're probably not even going to like to you start hyperventilating at week 7 because you know it's going to end soon and you're not going to have a reason to see them. You grow in love and friendship with these people. And that's why, Nicky Gumbel, I think he did like 98 alphas in a row. Like that's like 40 or 45 or 30 years of alpha. Like imagine how many people he really, 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 really got to know. And I found myself, as I was engaged in alpha when I was at St. Benedict Parish, people would be coming to me, what can I do? Because they've caught you loving them 11 weeks in a row. And it's like, how can I not give back to somebody who's loved me this much? With the kitchen team and the hospitality team and the weekend away team and the team at the table. And it's like, oh my gosh, this church cares about me. It's like, you're darn right we do. Like we really do.
Yeah.
And so, it's the fuel. It's the lubrication for what is church. If not, we're just trying to manipulate behavior. We're trying to change behaviors, but we don't have the power is in Jesus Christ. It's in that transformed heart. Jesus is primarily in the life transformation business, not the behavior modification business. That's secondary.
Totally.
It's almost not an issue.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's just a byproduct of a changed heart.
Yep. And I think, the power of relationship, it's just so crucial to our whole tradition. I think of St. Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, and he's saying, you can fathom all mysteries and have not love. You're a clanging gong and a resounding cymbal. And I think if St. Paul were speaking to the church today, he might say, you can have communion on the tongue, and you can have an organ, and you can have a high mass or a low mass, or, most of our fights are, got to do with liturgical preferences, and whether someone thinks that one is more reverend or the other one's more reverend, or who's the most serious Catholic, and what's your correct posture, and blah, blah. Look, you can have all of that, but without love, we're a clanging gong, and if you look at some, Catholic chat groups on social media, they're a clanging gong. They're a resounding cymbal, because they're a bunch of Catholics getting all upset about the little things, which are not essential to our tradition often. Occasionally they are, but a lot of the times they're just, little preferences and little things. And it's love that grows the parish. It's love that grows the church. It's love for each other, and it's love for God. And all the structures that we have facilitate that love. That's the whole point of them. They're there to facilitate love. Even canon law is there to facilitate that. You have to have boundaries in any functional relationship. You have to have boundaries in any functional household, and they facilitate the relationship. It's all about relationship.
It's almost like that second coming of Christ. He's going to say the same thing he said in the first time. I didn't come to strike out any letters of the law. I came to fulfill it. It's like, I didn't come to do it. I came to bring it to life. And that's how I feel about parish renewal. I'm not trying it's straight down the middle as far as I'm concerned. Like, why would I go left or right? Like, straight down the middle, and let's bring this to life. And you can tell a tree by its fruit.
Exactly.
And that's why, one of the parish leadership course, and one of the videos and talks that I have with people is making new disciples, new, capital N, capital E, capital W, like new Christians. How many new Christians are you making a year in your church? And if the answer is none, stop doing what you're doing, figure it out, and go at it again. Like, wrong answer. Like, you just tell you straight up, that's the wrong answer. So,
totally.
Measure it. How many new Christians are you making if you're doing church for a year with all of these people, and collectively you're not making new Christians, and I'm not just talking having babies. I'm not going to give you any credit for other people having babies. Like, that was God's idea. Are you making new Christians? And if you're not, dude, like, please stop the insanity. Stop it and figure this stuff out. Get help. Call Peter.
Yeah.
So what else are you doing? Like, I go wrong.
But I think it's making that process accessible too. A lot of Catholics think, I don't even know where to start with talking to someone about my faith, and blah 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 blah. Look, discipleship or accompaniment is a word that we often use. It's really pretty simple, right? I can go up to the girl behind the counter at the cafe, and I can begin discipling her. Like, what do you mean? Well, I just roll up and I order a coffee, right? Well, that's not discipling. No, but how's your day going? Oh, good. How long have you been working at the cafe? What did you do before that? All right. I'm getting to know her. I get into a relationship with her, right? And then it's like, hey, thanks for making us coffee. I'm here every morning, and I appreciate how friendly you guys, how warm you are, and how quickly you get my coffee out. I'm usually in a rush and I can't have a chat. It's really appreciated. So I'm beginning the relationship, right? And then next time you're through there, how's life for you? You're married, you're just getting to know them, and eventually they say, oh, what do you do? I work for the church next door. Discipleship is just building relationship, right? And as the relationship gets stronger, you've got a stronger bridge to deal with more personal issues, right? So the stronger the bridge that is made, the more open and vulnerable you can become. And so you get to a point then where you say, yeah, I work for the church next door. Jesus has really changed my life in a powerful way. And so it's really inspired me to try and serve the church and help the church become an organisation that loves people and brings life to people. What's your experience of the church? I grew up in church, and so you can see how the thing builds, but it's discipleship is just building relationship, but it's being intentional with how you use those little conversations. I'm an avid cyclist. I'm out in the push block most mornings, and I got a bunch of guys that I ride with, and we disciple them, right? I disciple them. They don't know they're being discipled. I'm not saying, would you like to be discipled? We just and they do the same thing to me. They check in if I'm struggling. What's going on, Pete? You're going all right. You look like you're really snowed under. And it begins there, and then it's when something happens where it hits the fan a bit. They have a marriage breakup, or a child goes AWOL, or an auntie dies or something, and then they'll be messaging me saying, "Hey Pete, we need someone to do last rites. Can you do that?" I'm like, "Well, I'm just a deacon, mate. I don't have the faculties, but I know several good priests that can, so I'll send you one round right now." Yeah, so
right.
It doesn't have to. It's not overcomplicated. Just build relationships, love the people around you, and when it's appropriate, share the reason for your joy.
Well, I wish I was in better shape next time I was in Australia. I'd go on your bike ride with you, but maybe I'll drive a car. I want to get back to your work with the diocese. 2 years later, you had to adjust some of your goals, but what I love about it, and I think you're still, I think you're well on your way. You're talking about the young people and the vision you have for youth groups and stuff, and you're doing some great work there, and it's awesome. What are you finding that was harder than you thought, and where are the wins coming from? Because it's harder than most people think.
Yeah, I think anyone who works in a diocese will know, and the larger the diocese, the more true this is. It's a huge organisation. We have 15,000 staff across 5 agencies, and most of those are education staff. Then some are centre care, which is like care for the poor, care for domestic violence victims, care for disabled people. And it's about 3,000 staff in that. And then there's sort of the church infrastructure around safeguarding and workplace health and safety, all that sort of stuff. And so a diocese is just multi-layered with bureaucracy, and it's part of just being a large organisation. And when you're trying to effect change in an organisation, and in our case has 94 parishes and 20 communities across a fairly large land mass, it's a slow process. And anyone who knows me will know I'm pretty impatient. I want to see change, I want to see life. I want to see the wins, I want to see people encounter God. I want to see parishes that are alive and really functional. And the challenge in a diocese is that takes time. If you're in a local parish, you're there, and your job is in the parish. You're there every week, and it's a confined, relatively, most parishes might have, 2 or 3 mass centres, a couple of schools. But that's an achievable goal. Over 3 to 5 years, you can make a significant impact on the culture if you're the leader of that community. Whereas if you're a leader in an organisation like mine, I've got to work with my staff, so I've got to work through my staff to some degree, and then I've got to try and work with and through 100-odd priests. Now, some of those are really keen to work with us and get on board, and they really appreciate the encouragement and the resources. Others are not so interested, and we don't force it ourselves. We're an invitational organisation. We're there to say to parishes, if you want our support, we're here to help you to the extent that you want it, but we don't sort of push in there.
Yep.
And so it means that the change is slower than it's like. I mean, we're talking a 20 to 30 year trajectory. And so part of my role in this job is not to think, oh, great, I'm just going to sit here for 20 to 30 years, but it's what are the foundations required? What are the structural pieces necessary so that no matter what happens to me in the next 10, 20, 30 years, the change can continue? And who are the people that I've got here that can take on this role so that I'm not necessarily here? I'm not here to hog a role for 30 years, but I do see a long-term trajectory of change for the diocese, and that requires long-term commitment. So we need to build in those the building blocks there so that they're there for generations to come, not just for the time that I'm the executive director. So the pace of change is really slow. Another challenge is engagement with schools. It's really difficult to build trust with our schools, and a lot of that has meant me sitting down with principals and explaining who I am and what my relationship is in the diocese, and also to the executive director of schools, and say what we're trying to do. And for a variety of reasons, and this is probably true across the West, the parishes have become a little bit of the weird uncle to the schools, or the priest has become a bit of a weird uncle figure even. And so the engagement of parishes in schools has been inconsistent, shall we say. And so where it's been a negative experience, the school's kind of trying to limit the damage that the parish is going to inflict on the school. Right? You don't know our context. We're a learning environment, and you don't really get where where the children are at and where their parents are at. And so you just come and do a liturgy once a year or once a semester, and then you just stay out. And so we're saying, no, we want to have our young youth staff in your school every week during lunch hours and at assemblies, and we want to invite your students along to our youth ministry. And that requires trust, and trust takes time to build, especially if it's been broken. So that's been a challenge for us. And the other thing I think that, and you've picked up on this earlier, is, look, you can't do anything in the Catholic Church without copping criticism. And in a diocese, you go and do something intentional, and there'll be someone there that's not happy. It's not their style, or they don't like it, or they think you should have done it this way or that way. Sometimes you get that feedback from some clergy as well. And so part of the challenge of leadership in the Catholic Church, whether you're a local parish priest or in a diocesan role, is being able to absorb the arrows, the flaming arrows that come, and they usually come from people within, not externally. It's how to extinguish those arrows without getting burnt, and being able to turn the other cheek, to be gentle in response to people, and just knowing when to respond and when not to as well. Like sometimes you get, anonymous letters having a dig at something we've done or one of our staff or whatever. All that sort of stuff goes on. And it's like,
it really
we're
does.
on the same side, like really. That's some of the challenges.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking into that. It's true. And I just coaching a group of priests today, and you don't understand, Ron. Like, oh yes, I do. But they're thinking, if we just keep saying yes, then there's no problems. But as soon as we start saying no, there's big problems. I'm thinking, I'm a dad. Like, and if I just keep saying yes to my kids, that's fine. But they eat ice cream and stay up all night, and they're cranky, and they do terrible at school. So I don't get to say yes. I had to know what to say yes. And back to your point about having kids, and so whether you're in the diocesan level or the parish level, we do get arrows if we're leading, and it often does come from inside. And sometimes those can sting a little bit more, but I think there are ways to deal with that and cope with that, and recognize that that just is a part of leadership, and it's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. It means you're doing a good job. Like, it could mean you're doing a good job, but it's part of the process.
And look, we've found that too. Last year, we in the parish that I serve, in the next door parish, parish priest from the adjacent parish is the administrator of the parish that I'm at, and so we've been working together on a process with the pastoral councils on going from 8 masses down to 4. Only like 550 odd people, so it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I mean, that number of people you could legit have two masses. We've got 8, so we're having these priests coming in, supply priests, for 30 people, 21 people, 22 people. It was crazy. You look at the numbers, and it's no brainer. But as soon as you say to the people in the community, we're going to go from 8 to 4, everyone's in conniptions and they're having heart attacks. And we followed a really collaborative process. We did surveys, we shared the broader vision, we talked about the need for change. We even had one of our bishops come and support us in that and share that we actually need to do this because it's the whole diocese that gets affected by the sheer quantity of masses being expected from small numbers of people. But still a very difficult process. But, for our priest involvement process, in some respects, looking back, and I think we were probably too collaborative. We gave people too much say. But once the decision was made, then it's settled. Our priest has really grown in that too, realising that he can actually lead. And when people realise that he is going to lead, they will in the end fall in behind. And some won't be very happy about it, but they'll come to terms with that. And so just recently, again, he's had to make some new announcements, and he's had a bit more courage this time, and he's jumped in and done it. And it's really great to see. It's encouraging to see the confidence that he's developing, because that's hard space, and he's the perfect example of a guy who hasn't been trained to make tough calls and stare people down who are against him. Yeah. It's hard to do, I mean, there might only be 10 of them in a group of 500, but they're compelling, and they're all got sad stories to tell you about why they love this church and this building and this mass time and how it's been part of their whole life, So, but the church in the whole world needs priests who will lead and who will make tough decisions for the sake of the mission. And just as you say, like every family needs parents that are going to make tough decisions for the sake of the family, that are in the best interests of the whole family, not just one. And priests have got to do the same.
Amen. What a great place to wrap up. Peter, it's so fun to talk with you. It is so fun to talk with you.
It's great to catch up.
Yeah, it's so fun.
We can talk easy.
Yeah, very easy. I get very excited by your passion for the church, and thank you for your sacrifice coming, from your Protestant background, your Pentecostal background, and bringing that passion and the belief that anything's possible to the Catholic Church, and then laying your life down to help us. I'm so grateful. You're a real gift to the church, and I'm so grateful for Archbishop Mark and how he's empowered you to really be in a position to come alongside of people that want to work with you, to lead a staff in a way, from a place of relational and what was the other leadership? Relational and purpose. Purpose leadership. You're a wonderful example of that, and I think today our listeners will see that and hear that in you, and take those gems home with them. For all of you that are our parish priests or seminarians, I want you to know we love talking about this stuff, and I get so excited about it and frustrated about it because I care so much. I respect priests. I respect the priesthood so much. I really do. And really felt called a long time ago to lay my life down in support of that. And so I get frustrated and animated and all those things. Not because I'm angry, although it comes across that way sometimes, because I care so much, I love so much, and I know how big of an impact you can have for the kingdom when we get all these things right. And so, truly, Peter, thank you for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for doing what you do. Yeah, you're a real gem to the church. God bless you.
Thanks, Ron. Pleasure. It's always great being on the show, and thanks for what you're doing too. It's incredible the number of priests whose lives you're impacting in support of their leadership. So you're a gift to the church. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. And we really appreciate you guys for following along and listening in, and all the work that you do in your parish. Again, we're going to be doing a podcast specifically answering your questions around handling conflict in the missional parish. So go to huntleyleadership.com/questions. Fire in your questions. Lorraine and I are going to build a whole podcast around that, and we're hoping that'll come out in June. So thank you again for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.
I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.